All right. Good morning. This is the Administrative Appeals hearing. If you're here for the Justice Court, that's next door. Today is Monday, March 17th, 2025. And my name is Frank Nakamura. I'm the duly appointed hearing officer for Holladay City. I want to state that I have no conflicts of interest with any of the parties, and I've had no ex parte communications with any of the parties except with the city procedural matters and one clarification. But there have been no substantive ex parte communications with either party. So let's begin. Item number 1 on the agenda is Holladay Peaks Lot 2 lot coverage variance. Let's see, is the applicant here? Want to go up and introduce yourselves? And this is being recorded, so we would like, of course, for you to speak into the microphone.
Restart, or did you hear what I was?
Maybe, again, we have a record that we're creating, so if you would restart.
Name is Jake Haruni, and I'm the owner of Lot 2 and Holladay Peaks. And we've been working on design of a final retirement home for us at Holladay Peaks.
And I'm Peter Gamvrulis with Ivory Homes. I'm technically the applicant, as at the time of application, we are the owner. And Jake is our contracted buyer right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's begin with the presentation. City? Justice?
Good morning. I'm Justice Tufor. I'm a city planner and the GIS manager in the Community and Economic Development Division. So for the case number 1, it's about Holladay Peaks Lot 2. This case is about a lot coverage variant. The address of this property is 1691 East Delaware Lane, Holladay, Utah, zip code 84117. The lot in question has a size of 0.24 acres, which translates into 10,451 square feet in one of our R110 zones, so single-family residential zone. Now, the request for this variant pertains to City Code Section 13.14.080, which relates to lot coverage. Now, what this city ordinance does is it moderates how much impervious surfaces that a property owner can install on their property, which includes structures, driveways, walkways, and or non-permeable surfaces. Now, the applicant here today is requesting an exception from the prescribed 31% maximum structural coverage, in turn proposing to maintain a 35% maximum structural coverage. Now, this request, if granted, would constitute a 4% structural coverage variance, which would run with the land in perpetuity. Now, the background to this case is that Ivory Homes and Mr. Peter Gamvrulas here filed an appeal with the administrative hearing officer to seek a variance to the above portions of City Code that I just read. Now, Ivory Homes and Mr. Gamvrulas have intentions of building a home on the address 1691 East Delaware. Now, this property is part of a recent subdivision, what we call the Holladay Peaks subdivision in the R110 zone. Now, according to the applicant, they're proposing to construct new residential homes which would require larger structural footprint than what city ordinance currently allows them to. Therefore, they have submitted this variant requesting to be allowed a 35% maximum structural coverage. Now, the applicant is also of the opinion that the city ordinance that governs lot coverage, it limits individual lots in Holladay and may not be fair or equitable in that matter. So this is something that they refer to in their narrative as a coverage inversion, which the applicant would give more clarification on this. We have outlined what the city code, section 13.14.080 states, and that is found in the report. Now, per the provisions of this ordinance, City of Holladay's regulation of lot coverage, it does this in a tiered category system. So based on the size of your property, you would have a certain percentage of structural maximum and then total lot coverage maximum that you're allowed to comply to. Now, per the size of the applicant's property, they're allowed a 31% structural coverage maximum and a 36% total impervious coverage maximum. Now, again, what city ordinance does is it also gives room for flexibility because in Holladay, we normally find instances where property owners run over their maximum allowed impervious surfaces. So the city ordinance makes a different provision that allows up to a 10% bonus when property owners go over their total impervious surfaces. Now, we must reiterate that this provision does not pertain to the maximum structural coverage, just the total impervious. So what this translates to is, in simple terms, if you're allowed to build a 35% or 31% structural coverage, that is the max. But then if you exceed the total, which is a 36%, you can be allowed to add additional 10% related to driveways or walkways or those hardscapes on a property. So based on the narrative that the applicant submits, city staff also does its own analysis to verify some of the claims that the applicant makes in their narrative. And the analysis are presented as follows. First is the application of the lot coverage code. Now, as I explained earlier, the lot coverage ordinance pertains to lot size. So it's strictly based on the size of your property. Now, the city code determines that these restrictions are granted in percentage terms relative to lot size categories. Now, if properties within a zone are found to have the same size, all of them are subject to that same restrictions regardless. So the structural coverage requirement, as I explained, is not a nuanced thing, and it's enforced strictly. And in fact, subsection 13.14.080C states that this provision may not be used to increase the maximum percentage coverage for all structures set forth here in the city code. Now, what this means is that, as I explained earlier, the structural coverage cannot be maxed out. When maxed out, cannot be offered any flexibilities. But if you max out on the total impervious, you are allowed additional. The city is very keen on enforcing lot coverage regulations to the effect that any type of development that exceeds the total impervious surfaces by 10%, it triggers an additional engineering requirement that requires the property owner to manage the on-site water retention. So you'd have to design and implement on-site water retention plans to that effect. And again, as the applicant stated in their narrative that they perceive an anomaly or a coverage inversion in the city ordinance, the applicants in their narrative, they state that there are inconsistencies in the coverage regulations which is a different way of stating that different lot sizes should be treated the same in terms of the percentage requirement. But then per city staff's analysis, this implication of inequity is quite the opposite of what city ordinance actually intends to achieve. And we say that to mean that the intent of the city ordinance is to mitigate excessive porous surfaces while ensuring low impact development in areas of urban build out. Now, furthermore, the ratio for structural coverage maximum ensures that there is actually equity in massing of structures and not necessarily equality. So if you just talk about the principle of equity, it means that treating individuals or properties or structures differently to achieve equal outcomes and not necessarily treating them the same. Now, a closer evaluation of the lot coverage table shows that these tiered categories are actually aligned with the zoning designation of properties, which ensures that there is consistency in massing. So what you'd see is that based on these categories, John, could you please scroll down to the table that also has the zones with the structural, yep, right there. So what you'd actually identify is that if, for instance, if we take a category of the first one, the lots less than 10,000 square feet, you'd find that all of these lots are normally located within the R18 and R14 zones. So that means that all the properties within that zone are being treated with that 35% structural maximum. And the applicant finds their property within the over 10,000 square feet, but then maxing out at 15,000 square feet, that category, which means that all properties within that same category are treated equally within that 31% structural footprint maximum and the 36% structural footprint maximum. So what you would actually see is that in spite of regulating the amount of impervious surfaces, the city ordinance also has an intent of moderating massing and scale on similar sized properties within the city. Again, the applicant provides an example comparing the massing requirement to smaller size lots, less than 10,000 square feet, which puts them in a different category. However, what they fail to recognize is the fact that that's going to be a mismatch because you're essentially comparing lots in R18 or R14 to lots in R110. So that's a mismatch that was done in the narrative or the analysis from the applicant. Essentially, they're drawing parallels between massing requirements for properties situated within different zones with different neighborhood characteristics. Moreover, an estimate of the lot sizes in the applicant's neighborhood shows that the average size of a lot within that neighborhood, which is the Holladay Peak subdivision with the Delaware neighborhood, shows that the average lot size is about 10,019 square feet, which means that most of the properties within that vicinity fall within that category of that over 10,000 square feet, but then maxing out at the 15,000 square feet. And thus, they're all treated with the 31% structural footprint coverage. Again, similar size lots in Holladay are smaller size lots in Holladay are subject to less restrictive structural footprint requirements in order to reduce the disproportionate impacts of massing for properties with more constrained spaces. So as you can see, the smaller the lot size, the larger the structural footprint. So this again, as I said, to moderate impact of massing and limitations in lot size for smaller lot size. But what you'd also find is that when you compare in absolute size, these percentage terms for smaller size seem larger, but then when you compare that to, for instance, someone who has a lot size of 70,000 square feet, being allowed to build a 20% structural footprint, you would find that in actuality, that structural footprint is actually bigger than what someone who's allowed a 35% structural footprint would enjoy in a 10,000 square feet property. So while larger lots generally have more restrictive coverage requirements, their absolute structural sizes are bigger than that of smaller size lots. And you'd also identify that the applicant in their narrative tried to make a comparison of their lot size versus someone in the 10,000 square feet property. But what that does essentially is that they're comparing a lower class boundary in their lot size category to someone in the upper class boundary, which is also a mismatch. So if they want to do similar size comparison, they would have to compare a lower class boundary in their lot size category to a lower class boundary, not the other way around. Now, the last part of the analysis that city staff did was to check to see if there is any potential precedent of a self-imposed hardship. And what city staff found was that Holladay Peak subdivision, as indicated earlier, is a fairly new subdivision that was created sometime last year. And city staff believes that the intent of this new subdivision and the ensuing rezoning that was done, because that subdivision, that property used to be owned by the LDS Church and then was rezoned into the Holladay Peaks subdivision. This ensuing subdivision and rezoning of that property was not to create a very unique neighborhood that was distinctively different from the surrounding Westmore and Delaware neighborhoods. Now, in fact, the applicant acknowledges this by stating in their contextual narrative that the ordinance's goal is to ensure that new development is harmonious with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Again, when the subdivision was rezoned to R110 with their predetermined lot sizes, it was understood that the development that would ensue on the subdivision would adhere to the applicable standards that governs buildings within the R110 zone. Now, city staff does not believe that the intent of the subdivision was to create conditions where multiple of these properties would run into non-conforming situations. This observation is supported by the fact that the city planner reviewing the permits for other lots within the new Holladay Peaks subdivision, Lot 5 specifically, had also run into similar lots structural coverage footprint issues when doing their zoning analysis on that. City staff recognizes that this situation may potentially mirror a self-imposed hardship, given the fact that the applicant's narrative states that they purchased the property as a finished lot from the developer and have a contracted buyer who prefers a larger home size than what is actually permitted by what city ordinance requires. Now, similar size lots within the Holladay Peak subdivision that have tendered in a permit to the planning department, specifically lot 108 and lot 109, are currently being permitted by the planning department. And mind you, these lots also have the same lot sizes as the one in question right now. Now, these lots have been able to meet the structural footprint requirements that is moderated by the city. So this comes down to whether the lot in question poses very unique characteristics from the others that were able to meet these same structural coverage requirements by the city, or if this request is just subject to a matter of the buyer's preference for a larger home size. City staff defers that to the applicant to provide sufficient evidence that substantiates the existence of a legitimate hardship that would occur if the variance is not granted. Now, as we know, for a variance application, it runs through state law, as you initially mentioned, and the applicant is supposed to provide a systematic response to how they meet all those state criteria, those 5 criteria. Now, the first one is for the applicant to describe what hardship is going to occur if the variance is not granted. Now, in demonstrating that, that there is a unique circumstance that is related to the property, or there is going to be an unreasonable hardship. No explicit response was provided to clarify the exceptionally difficult situation that would be created when they comply with the zoning regulations in the applicant's narrative. Again, the applicant did not really state what hardship is going to occur if a variance is not granted. The applicant notes that in Lot 2, which is part of the new subdivision, as I earlier mentioned, with immediate neighbors being either new or vacant lots, suggests that there is going to be minimal impact because there are no pre-existing structures on the neighboring lot. So the applicant presents that when they're granted this variance, it's not going to have substantial impact on neighboring property. However, city staff would like to highlight that the designation of the property as a new lot does not really exempt the property from complying with the ordinance regulations applicable to that zone. Moreover, the applicant's reference to the perceived inequity has been addressed in the staff analysis by comparing the lot sizes and the structural coverage requirements. So in summary, city staff submits that the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated, at least in their narrative, the presence of unique circumstances or hardships that would occur if the variance is not granted. So city staff therefore recommends that the applicant uses this hearing this morning to provide a more clear justification on what makes compliance with the city ordinance unreasonable. Again, the applicant is supposed to describe how the property is very different from other properties within the vicinity, which is the existence of special circumstances. Now, the applicant provided no justification for that in their narrative. It was a blank side of that report. However, city staff assesses that the property in question, Lot 2, does not exhibit distinguishing characteristics in terms of its size, shape, or lot configuration when compared to other lots within the subdivision. Now, consequently, there is no basis that warrants exceptional treatment if the lot is not unique in terms of its size, shape, or configuration from others. The third criteria by state law is to describe the benefits that other property owners within that vicinity enjoy at the expense of the applicant if they are not granted this variance. Now, what the applicant does is that in their narrative, in trying to justify the applicant's enjoyment of substantial property rights that are consistent with that of other properties within that same district, they cite the bias preference as a justification. Now, specifically, if I'm to read a quote from the applicant's narrative, they state that to achieve desired home size, a two-story design would be required, which would not be in line with the bias preference for a single-level home. Now, as shown in the extracts that I just read, the benefit outlined by the applicant is clearly rooted in the bias preference rather than a legitimate comparison with property rights that are enjoyed by others within that same vicinity. Again, a GIS analysis of that subdivision and the ensuing neighborhood characteristics showed that the average structural footprint for homes within the Delaware Lane Westmore area shows that the average neighborhood home is about 1,730 square feet. Now, if you estimate what the city ordinance allows for the maximum, even with the 31%, which is where the applicant's property currently fits. Now, what that 31% gives them in terms of absolute structural size would be 1,500 square feet bigger than what the average home size is within that neighborhood. So city staff does not really believe that granting the variance would be essential to substantial enjoyment of property rights and common privileges that are enjoyed by neighbors within that vicinity. Now, again, describing why the variance would not deviate from the general purpose of the Holladay City Code. Lot Coverage Ordinance, Section 13.14.080, is very explicit in its intent to restrict the coverage of impervious surfaces and constructions that can initiate events that modify water resources, urban air elements, and the overall environment. Now, subsection C of the ordinance reads that this provision may not be used to increase the maximum percentage for structures in this ordinance. Now, in light of the clear intent of the city ordinance, city staff disagrees with the applicant's assertion that granting the variance would not contradict with the Holladay City Development Code. Now, lastly, the applicant is supposed to describe how the variance is fair and conforms to the overall intent of the zoning laws. Now, in conforming to the general intent of the zoning laws and fairness, the applicant surmises their narrative by highlighting the position of the lot within a new subdivision and what they call the coverage inversion as their justification for describing how the variance would be fair. City staff submits that the property is not unique in its characteristics, nor is there any coverage inversion as the applicant points out in their narrative. In fact, all similar sized lots within R110 zones are treated the same and have the same coverage requirements. That is the 31% structural footprint. Now, granting a variance in this circumstance, where there is an absence of a unique circumstance from the neighbors or by virtue of being a new lot, does not really align with the principle of fairness to produce equal outcomes. City staff therefore believes that the situation does not warrant fairness in applying city ordinance, nor does it uphold the spirit of zoning. In conclusion, city staff's technical review of the city code and the analysis of the geospatial characteristics of the property shows that granting this variance does not really appear to be the least intrusive solution to upholding the spirit of zoning as outlined in our code chapter 13.14.080. Now, the city has also not received any building designs that can be referenced so that the city's technical review committee can also make recommendations based off of what the applicant is requesting and if there is going to be any alternatives that can be alternative design solutions that could be provided from the city's technical review committee. Moreover, the applicant's request to be an exception to the rule based on the buyer's preference appears to be a self-imposed hardship. Thus, discussions regarding denials or approval of this application should be moderated by examining the language of city code, the applicant's narrative, and any proceedings that we get from this hearing from the general public. Now, from city staff's perspective, this variance does not comprehensively pass the 5-part test variance approval standards, and denial is recommended from city staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tefor. A couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
Lot 108 and 109 of the 10-lot subdivision, are they of equivalent size to Lot 2?
Yeah. So
Are there any peculiar differences between Lot 108 and 109 and Lot 2?
in absolute size, it's literally the same because the subdivision was created with similar size lots. So it's a 10-lot subdivision with very similar size lots. So the only difference that you could say would be in terms of ones being on a corner. If there is any difference, it's probably going to be ones that are on a corner versus ones that are just interior lots. But even with that,
Which ones are on the corner?
so I believe, let's see, I think lot 105 is on a corner. Mr.
No,
Peters?
what I was asking was those that are in the process of getting a permit, made an application, that would be 108 and 109.
108, 109 are
Are not-
interior lots, like,
Okay, and are there any other lots that have received or in the process of receiving building permits in that 10-lot subdivision?
Yeah, so we have lot 102,
10
not for 105, the one with the variance application. We have for 102, 108, and 109.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned section 1480C. I don't recall them ever seeking any relief under that provision anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Purely, we're dealing with 1480B.
B,
Right?
that's correct.
Okay. Let's see. All right. One other question. In the surrounding neighborhoods, you mentioned the average structure size. Are those lots of similar size to Lot 2?
Yeah.
Okay. And to your knowledge, are there any differences between those properties and Lot 2?
So, John, if we could pull up the vicinity map, it should be at the very end of the report. So that is the vicinity map. So what we found from our GIS analysis was that even the lots that are outside of the Holladay Peak subdivision have similar sized lots to what the subdivision.
And that's all
entails.
R110. They're all R110.
They're all R110.
Zone,
The
okay.
zoning map is right there.
All right. Mr. Faure, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
sure.
Mr. Gamvroulas?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Justice, for that presentation. I think what is being a little bit muddled here is what our argument is in terms of what we're referencing as the inversion that happens inside of code. So we don't disagree with the city's understanding that yes, we are in a particular sizing which requires by the code a certain percentage. We understand that. What we're referencing is the anomaly that we run into with the particular sizing that happens. So as Justice had mentioned, the intent of that particular scaling is that on smaller lots, a reasonable home may take a larger percentage of that, and we can understand that. And so as you move through the scale, what will generally happen is a smaller lot will be permitted a larger percentage, but what will typically result is a larger home on a larger lot, just because of the sizing and the percentage. What we find here with this particular lot is that we're in a minute area where what happens is we're actually, though a larger lot, required to have a smaller home. So that's what we're referencing as the coverage inversion ratio. And I think that that's where this anomaly is where the code kind of breaks down, where it doesn't actually meet its own purpose, at least its stated purpose. The purpose, of course, and I don't have the exact reference at hand, but Justice had mentioned it, when it comes to coverage is to protect its environmental concerns. It's water runoff, it's all that. As Justice had mentioned, there's certain ways that you can even mitigate environmental concerns to up your impermeable surfaces. However, it does have a specific exclusion for your own primary structure. So the code itself is a little interesting in saying that you can have more impermeable surfaces if you make mitigating efforts, such as our tanks, underground water mitigation, which we are employing on this site. But there's this limit to, you can have larger driveways, you can have all these things which the code recognizes as environmental concerns, but you can't apply that to the home. So the code itself seems to contradict some of its stated purposes when it comes to that. But again, our largest argument is that as you look through the scale, which for the most part makes sense, smaller lots have smaller homes, but those smaller homes will likely require a larger percentage of the lot to be taken. And as you move through the scale, it mostly works out, but when you're in the lowest part of the scale that we're in, what happens is you're required to have a smaller home. So the anomaly is if we made this lot 450 square feet smaller, we could have a larger home, which is the anomaly that we're trying to reference in our application. And so I guess as the city had mentioned that we did not bring up a special circumstance for this lot, while we don't disagree that this lot is different in any way in shape or functionality from the surrounding neighborhood, our reference is the special circumstance is that we find ourselves inside of this inversion in the actual code. And so because of our lot sizing, where you would expect a larger home, we're actually limited to a smaller home on a bigger lot. And then I'll turn this to Jake, if you don't mind.
No.
I've lived in Holladay from 1976 to 2020. Various parts of Holladay, starting from Hermosa to down to Kaland Way, Holly Lane, Walker Lane, and then Cottonwood Lane. I presently live in Alpine, Utah, in a smaller home. We, just me and my wife now, and we would like to come back to Holladay. All our friends, our church has been here for that many years, and we come back to it all the way from Alpine. So we decided to build a house in Holladay. Our kids are in Salt Lake. And we want to make sure that we have, based on our health needs, a larger footprint on the main floor because we're going to end up on one floor with potential for 2 or 3 bedrooms on the main floor for care purposes. So that is the reason. As far as the rest of this is concerned, I've served on numerous boards and commission, much like you sitting on the bench, and adjudicating on state code. And many, many times I've asked for new rulemaking because the codes, the state code, and I presume the city code is the same, is all, in certain cases, black and white. There's a small difference between 10,000 square feet and 10,009 square feet can throw you into a category that is not conducive to development. And this is the case in this scenario. We are put into a category of 15,000 square foot or more, and based on a very, very small increase in square footage, and the way the city is looking at it, of course, is based on the code, black and white, no transition zone, and not allowing us to achieve what we want to do. There are larger lots in Sandy, Draper, etc., that we could choose to be in, but Holladay's our home. So that's the reason we want to come back.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gambroulis, lots 108 and 109 were referenced. They are in the process of getting a building permit. How are they? Are they distinguishable from Lot 2?
Very nominally in lot sizing.
Are there any other lots in this 10-lot subdivision, your new subdivision, that are in the process of getting a building permit or have built?
None have been built as of yet. I think that there's in total 4, and I think those are the listed lots that are in process with building permit.
Yeah, 4. So I want to make sure 108, 109, yours, 102, and 105.
105, I believe, yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's in process on our end, but maybe not submitted to the city.
Well, 105, is that, are they going to be complying with the 31% coverage?
I do believe so.
Okay, and are they distinguishable from Lot 2?
Yeah, again, most of these they have very minor square footage differences.
Okay. Let's see. I believe those are the only questions I have. I just want to clarify, of course, the purview of the People's Hearing Officer is not to change an ordinance or its interpretation. It is to determine whether the strict enforcement of an ordinance would cause an unreasonable hardship based on some peculiar circumstance to this property. And of course, it cannot be economic or self-imposed. I wanted to clarify, in terms of the structure of the ordinance, that is not within this purview. It's that's for another forum. That's for the legislative body of the city to handle. My job is to determine whether the strict enforcement causes an unreasonable hardship. I wanted to clarify that to you. Whether I think that the categories or whatever should be changed or modified, that is not within our purview. Okay, I wanted you to understand that. All right. Any other information from the city? And from, yes, sir.
The hardship to us would be 3 or 4 months of design work, the amount of money that we put in based on contract that it's going to be lost. So the hardship is going to be, yes, economic hardship to us quite a bit. And if we don't get what we need, then we have to pull out of this lot, which means the economic hardship to us is going to be much severe.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I understand that. All right. Any other comments? We'll take this matter under advisement, and we'll have a written opinion in at least 5 business days. We'll submit it to the city, and will be distributed to all interested parties. I do appreciate your civility and your professionalism, as always, Mr. Gamboulas, your professionalism and the city for being so thorough about this. I thank you, and we'll have a written opinion within 5 business days. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item on the agenda is, could you pull up the agenda? I want to make sure I read it properly. Item number 2, Wheatley addition, side setback variance. Is anyone here on behalf of the applicant? Okay. We are recording this, so make sure you speak in the microphone. Please state your name for the record, please.
My name is Camille Wheatley.
Okay. I have received your application with the narrative and drawings and plans, and have reviewed them. I also have received the staff report prepared by the city and have reviewed that. If there are no objections, I would like to have those included in the record. Any objections?
No.
Okay. So I need to preliminarily at least state that, and I said in the previous matter, that the appeals hearing officer is not here to interpret statutes or to determine whether I interpret a code provision differently than the city. I'm particularly referencing the section regarding ornamental functions that or architectural protections or ordinary projections of windows that might be in the setback area. The city has made that interpretation. It is not for me to reinterpret those provisions. That's for, again, another forum. So that is not going to be addressed, other than to say that we accept the definitions, interpretation as determined by the city. Okay, and if there's a disagreement as to that interpretation, that's again for another forum. My responsibility is to determine whether or not strict enforcement of a provision, in this case the setback, side setback requirements, create an unreasonable hardship. And so these alleged hardships must come from circumstances that are peculiar to the property, not from general conditions that are applicable to the general neighborhood. And I also want to give you a caveat that may not find unreasonable hardship that is economic or self-imposed. Okay? So with that, I'll have the city make a presentation.
All right. Good morning once again. I'm Justice Dufour, City Planner, City of Holladay Community and Economic Development Division. So the case number 2 is a setback variant for the property addressed 1876 East Osage Orange Avenue, Holladay, Utah, zip code 84124. Now the lot size is 0.25 acres, which translates into a little over 10,000 square feet in the R110 zone. Now, the governing ordinances, the setback ordinance, section 13.14.056, exceptions on setback areas to be obstructed, 13.09.020. The applicant is seeking an exception to the regulations that pertain to these two sections of City Code. The first one, section 13.14.056, pertains to site setbacks, and 13.76.153 pertains to exceptions to obstructing setback areas. Now, to explain in detail, what the first city ordinance does is it regulates the minimum site setback between the property line and the main structure on any lot in Holladay, while the second ordinance, section 13.76.153, provides interpretation on what features are allowed exceptions to obstruct into the setback areas. Now, the applicant is making an appeal based on these two alternative requests. One is to be granted a relief from the required 8.4 feet site setback, or 2, which the hearing officer gave a clarification on about the interpretation of City Code of what qualifies to be an architectural projection or not. Now, in turn, if this variance is approved, that would result in a 1 foot side setback and a 1 foot 6 inches no point closer than setback variance. Now, I must state for the record that this variance application is a little bit technical, so I apologize if it comes across that way. As a background to this variance application, the Wheatleys submitted a building permit to the planning department proposing an expansion to the west side of the main residence. Upon review of the original submission, which was in January 8, 2024, it was determined that the cantilevered portion of the upper floor on the west side of the proposed addition encouraged into the minimum average setback requirement. Now, consequently, on January 11th, 2024, the zoning department notified the applicant that this cantilevered extension of the upper floor was not compliant and requested a revised site plan that adhered to the setback regulations. Following this correspondence with the applicant, Camille Whitley, who is also the architect on record, she acknowledged this non-compliance issue in writing on March 6th, 2024, and submitted a revised site plan that eliminated that bump out portion of the house that encroached into the setback. Now, city received that revised site plan March 7th, and subsequently, the zoning review approved this revised site plan without the bump out. Now, what department process is that once zoning is done, for just like any building permit, we move it from the planning division or zoning division, as you would say, to the building division, engineering division, and so on and so forth. So following subsequent reviews from these other departments, the permit was approved and issued for construction. However, the approved and stamped city plans had inadvertently included the previously submitted January 4th, I believe, January 8th plans instead of the zoning approved March 7th plans, which included the cantilevered projection of the building rather than the revised compliant version that eliminated that section of the house. Now, the applicant and their contractors proceeded with the construction according to these stamped plans and were later called out during a routine inspection by the city's building official in January of 25, early this year. Now, the building official brought to the attention of the Community and Economic Development departments that the cantilevered portion of the upper floor might potentially be too close to what city ordinance requires for the site setback. Upon further investigation, it was determined that the construction had actually followed the originally submitted non-compliant plans in January and not according to the revised site plan in March of 2024. In response, the applicants have submitted a variance application to retain the cantilevered portion that extends on the upper floor as constructed right now. Now, the Wheatleys are of the opinion that enforcing the city ordinance that governs the minimum site setback to remove that bump out section of the house would impose extreme hardship that necessitates a redesign or a reconstruction of the nearly completed upper level space of the structure. Now, additional information regarding the applicant's narrative were submitted to the hearing officer. So, again, as I mentioned in the previous case, city staff also does analysis for verification purposes to verify what the applicant submits in their narrative versus what city staff also thinks. Now, in pursuant to City Code 13.14.056, the minimum side yard setback for any property in any zone, in any single-family residential zone, is a combined 25% of the lot width, with no one side of the building going closer than 10% of the lot width. For lots that are twice the minimum lot size, they have different provisions, but that's not what pertains to this case. In this case, we apply the 25% combined side setback, and then the 10% being 1 point being no closer to the property line. Now, John, if you may, great. Now we have that right there. Now, from this city staff analysis, the blue dotted line is what the city average is for the 10%. Now, again, to just clarify, the 25% combined side setback is something that is left to the property owner to determine whether 10% would be and whether 15% would be shared between those side setbacks. Now, in this case, the 10% is on the west side of the property. So the blue dotted line shows where the average required 10% should be, which should be 8.4 feet. Now, what city ordinance also does is that in spite of the 10% side setback average, city ordinance allows a 15% variation for parts of the building to extend into the required 10%.
What was that citation? I'm sorry.
Let's see, it should be in the
1314050 paren 1, is that right?
It should be in the introductory section for the setbacks in the city ordinance. So it should be in 050, 13.14.050.
Right.
So B.
B.
So that's where the,
B, right.
B, that's
I'm sorry.
correct.
All right. I'm
So
sorry.
that-
Sorry, Justice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's for clarification purposes. So that provision of city code allows property owners or designers to extend parts of the building into the average, which is the blue dotted line.
Is it 056 or 050?
056C.
56B.
Oh, yeah.
051 has the implementation and averaging of setbacks.
056.
Right. Right.
1B. Yep. So there it is. So. Yeah. Yep. So that's the specific ordinance that allows for the variations. And again, it's also stated in the report. I just caught this. So on page 4, where we have the site plan, the report states per city code 13.14.0561B, the implementation of setbacks allows variations for parts of a structure to extend into the average, which is the blue dotted line. So no point of the building can exceed this 15%. And what this 15% means is the red dotted line that extends outside of the blue dotted line. It's where no part of the building should extend outside, regardless. So you would see we noted NPC under that red line to signify no point closer than. So per the staff analysis, although the average side setback should be 8.4 feet, no point of the building can go closer than 7 feet 2 inches. But you would see that the original site plan that was non-compliant had a part of that, the cantilevered portion, extending all the way outwards to 5 feet 8 inches, which translates into 1 foot 6 inches farther than the no point closer than distance. So in actuality, as I said, it's a little bit technical. In terms of the average setback, when we averaged what the site plan is for the west side setback, the average setback using the 10-point diagram as we show, it shows the average side setback to be 7 feet 4 inches, which means it is exactly a foot extending, encroaching into the required 8 feet 4 inches average side setback. But when we talk about the no point closer than, it is extending 1 foot 6 inches from the what city ordinance actually requires them to do. So again, apologies for the little bit of technicalities, but just to explain for everyone to understand. Now, it must be noted for the record that this was the site plan that was originally submitted in January of 24 that zoning rejected and asked for a revised. So on the next page of the report, you would see that the applicant submitted a revised site plan March 3rd of 2024 that entirely eliminated that bump out from the site plan, which then complied with the average and no point closer than setbacks. So email correspondence were shared with the applicant, who in this case is also the architect, acknowledging that the site plan had been revised. They've taken out this bump out and everything complies right now. So city staff also attached additional correspondence showing the email correspondence between city staff and applicant, which consistently identified the setback issue and the intent of the applicant, who is also the architect, to address that. Now, these renditions of plan reviews and records of correspondence with the applicant clearly demonstrated that the planning department maintained its intent to enforce the setback requirement by requiring the removal of the non-compliant bump out extension. However, city staff found it a little bit unnerving to know that despite there was an administrative error, again, as I said, once the plan is approved, it goes through multiple divisions, and at the end of the day, it was inadvertently stamped with the non-revised site plan. So it was a little bit unnerving for city staff to know that in spite of that oversight in stamping the non-compliant plan, especially with the applicant being the architect who was also aware of this requirement and redesigned the site plan to comply, did not notify the city about that. The city provides an extract of the planning director's determination on this case in the report, which gave the applicant 3 alternative courses of action to pursue, 1 being a variance application, which is being heard today, 2 is for applying for an administrative interpretation of what that bump out entails, if it's an architectural projection or not. And 3 is amending the site plan back to the city zoning approved March 6th site plan that eliminated the bump out. So from today's proceedings, it's obvious that the applicant chose to go with the first 2 options, a variance application. Now, regarding the applicant's request to classify or interpret the cantilever extension, as you rightly made that comment, that is outside the purview of this hearing. This hearing is not to make an administrative interpretation of what city code is. So we will just move over that part of the application and specifically focus on the variance application for side setback. Again, as I mentioned in the first case, every variance application is run through the state law 5 criteria for approving a variance. So the first one being for the applicants to establish a hardship that's going to occur if the city strictly enforces the city code. Now, in doing this, the applicant must demonstrate the existence of unique circumstances or an unreasonable hardship that makes it exceptionally difficult to comply with the zoning regulations. In doing that, the applicant outlined hardship conditions that were mainly related to redesigning the entire upper floor of the proposed house and financial constraints as their burden of proof. Now, we must emphasize that per state law, economic hardship is not considered as a hardship for a variance test. It doesn't satisfy the burden of proof under the state law. However, it would be reasonable to accommodate this under this extension of the bump out under the assessment of impact on the neighboring properties and the compliant with the height restrictions that is put in place by the city zoning ordinance. Now, an independent assessment of the applicable zoning laws by the city's technical review committee indicates that although the no point closer than setback requirement has been violated by 1 foot and 6 inches, the non-compliant site plan with the architectural design for that still complies with the massing regulations pertaining to the graduated height requirement. Now, what the graduated height requirement does is it moderates height and scaling impacts on neighboring property. And what that does is it introduces an 8-foot vertical line on the property line, and then bends that at a 45-degree angle, making sure that a significant portion of the building envelope fits underneath this graduated height to moderate impact on neighboring properties. Now, what the assessment found was that although this architectural floor plan and site plan is not compliant to the zoning requirements, it still complies with the graduated height requirement, which minimizes impact on neighboring properties. Again, the floor plan on these designs identifies the use of the 3 feet bump out space as a washroom extension, suggesting a non-regular active use of that space. Now, decisions regarding accommodating this hardship condition presented by the applicant should be moderated by weighing the costs and benefits of allowing the 1 foot 6 inch encroachment versus requiring a redesign of the entire upper floor level, including removing of walls, windows, roof, plumbing, electrical, and insulation elements. Now, given that an administrative error led to the stamping of the non-compliant plans, city staff is of the opinion that the hardship condition is not self-imposed. Again, city staff suggests that accommodating these hardships would be reasonable comparative to requiring compliance with the city code on setback standards as pertaining to section 13.14.056. So moving on, we also assess how the property distinguishes itself from others within that vicinity on Osage Orange Avenue. Now, in doing this, the applicant should be able to demonstrate special circumstances that are attached to the property that makes it different. However, the city staff disagrees with the applicant's assertion that the property distinguishes itself from others within the vicinity. Now, like any other regular shaped lots on Osage Orange Avenue, the Whitley's property does not really exhibit unique characteristics in terms of the size and shape, or does it have special circumstances that distinguish it from others in that vicinity. Now, while the applicant maintains that no other single-family residence on the street in the R110 zone on Osage Orange Avenue has a business backyard, that land use comparison is not really relevant to this case, because what that comparison was is that it was comparing the neighboring property to the south, which does not really pertain to a side setback variance application. Again, the applicant cites the backyard neighbor, which is Holladay Water, as potentially setting a precedent for setback encroachment to support their case. However, city staff analysis finds that that structure owned by Holladay Water was built in 1976, which means the city had not even incorporated. So that means it was permitted under different zoning regulations and would be inappropriate to set as a precedent for this variance. Moving further, the applicant is supposed to justify or produce evidence of benefits that other properties within that vicinity enjoy at their expense. Now, in justifying this, the applicant references 8 different properties on Osage Orange Avenue, inferring that these properties currently enjoy closer setbacks than what the Whitleys are requesting for. Now, the applicant indicates that granting them the variance would ensure that they enjoy similar site setback benefits that these other properties are enjoying. So city staff also did its GIS verification to see if this is true as presented by the applicant. Now, it must be stated that although these homes are not recently built homes, their average site setbacks to the property line ranged substantially. Some of them were as close as 2 feet to the property line. which was 1929 East Orange Avenue. Some had 3 feet, 1925 Osage Orange, 3.5 feet, 1928 East Osage Orange Avenue, and the widest was about 7 feet, which is 1911 East Osage Orange Avenue. Now, given that the site setbacks for these neighboring properties are currently closer than the applicant requested 7 feet 4 inches average site setback, city staff believes that granting the variance to the applicant will be essential to the substantial enjoyment of common privileges that are being enjoyed by neighboring properties on Osage Orange Avenue. Now, moving further, the applicant is also supposed to describe why the variance would not deviate from the general purpose of the Holladay City Code. Now, in doing this, any deviations from the city code should not be contrary to the public interest, as pertained in the provisions in the setback ordinance 13.14.050. Now, this setback ordinance states, and it's very explicit in its intent to ensure uniform setbacks to achieve specific outcomes. Now, in certain instances too, it allows flexibility in setbacks also to achieve equally desirable outcomes. In light of the circumstance presented in this case, city staff agrees with the applicant that ensuring uniform neighborhood setbacks, just like the currently existing setbacks on Osage Orange Avenue, does not deviate from the general intent of the development code. And thus, the applicant also believes that improving their property by doing this addition on their house would also increase their neighbor's property value and does not go contrary to the public interest. Now, lastly, the applicant is supposed to demonstrate why the request for this variance is fair and conforms to the overall intent of the zoning laws. Now, in doing this, city staff's analysis indicates that granting the variance would be reasonable. Now, this is supported by the fact that the neighboring properties in the vicinity already maintain significantly closer setbacks than what the applicant is requesting for. And although city staff must express that the applicant's refusal to notify the city when they got hold of the erroneously stamped plans does not really uphold the spirit of zoning. Nevertheless, the broader intent of the setback regulation to produce equal outcomes in terms of the site setbacks with the neighboring properties aligns with the intent of this applicant's request. Now, as a final recommendation, concluding from the city staff's technical review of city code and analysis of the case contest, granting the 1 foot 6 inches variance request appears to be the least intrusive solution to upholding the spirit of zoning as outlined in section 13.14.050. Now, generally, discussions regarding denials or approval for this case should be moderated by examining the language of the city code, the applicant's narrative, city staff's findings, and any submissions that are received hearing. So from the city staff's perspective, this variance passes the test for variant approval standards, and approval is recommended from the city.
Thank you, Mr. DeFore. That was quite a bit. First of all, so as far as the 8 properties that are in the area, you agree that for the most part those are true?
Yes.
Okay. So they are less than what the applicants are asking in terms of their variance of 5.5 feet 8 inches.
Yeah, substantially. Okay. And it was not included in the report, but there were cases where certain properties were sitting right on the property line, and they're also on Osage Orange Avenue.
Is it now the Holladay Water? Is that Holladay Water Company? That's not associated with the city.
No, Holladay Water
Company, right?
Yeah. That's not.
I understand it's not relevant in terms of business being in the backyard, but they are, as I understand, 2 feet from the property line, their buildings.
Yeah.
That's consistent with a lot of these 8 properties that were identified by the applicants.
That's correct.
Economic waste, that's a principle of the law that we don't want to see economic waste as part of a remedy, despite whether there's a mistake or not. Would you address that? I mean, if there is no variance, they would be required to tear out their cantilevered portion, redesign, plumbing, electric. Would that be not economic waste if at this point they would have to do that?
Yeah, at this point, it would be, because an assessment of the floor plan showed that portion of the house, that the westward part of the house was where all the washrooms on the upper floor were. So tearing that out would essentially mean that they would have to redesign that and find new places for washrooms.
I think economic waste, at least, is not, when the statute refers to economic, that's not what it's referring to. It's referring to, for financial reasons, you need a different kind of design. This is involving economic waste because of the construction based on the initial plans, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Help me out in terms of the variance. I want to make sure I get this right, understanding this right. So we're dealing with section 1314.056. No other sections.
That's correct.
And what we're asking for is a 5-foot, 8-inch variance so I mean, the minimum west side setback would be 5 feet, 8 inches to accommodate the cantilevered, already constructed cantilevered portion of the addition. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, those are the only questions. I may have other questions.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Sounds good.
Camille Wheatley,
Yes.
you want to come up and?
Oh, sure.
Please introduce yourself for the record. This is being recorded, so please speak into the microphone.
My name is Camille Wheatley. I am the architect/owner for the property located at 1876 East Osage Orange Avenue.
Okay. As I said, we need to discuss the unreasonable hardship and why your property has peculiar circumstances, different from everyone else. So I'm going to let you proceed.
Just to describe the hardships, or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so the project was being built according to the stamped plans, and thank you, Justice, for that excellent presentation, very thorough, and you did a good job of presenting all the information. Yes, the project and the cantilever was under construction, and then at a regularly scheduled inspection, I believe it was the 4-way inspection, one of the Holladay City's building inspectors noticed the cantilever as potentially being too close to the west side setback, as Justice mentioned. And anyway, so the contractor wasn't sure what to do. As the owner/architect, I wasn't sure what to do, so we just kind of put things on pause, but there wasn't really a work stop order in place. So at that point, I had communication with the city, and like Justice mentioned, they provided the options to pursue the variance or the administrative appeals or the changing the setback. And because the project was so far along in its construction state, my husband and I decided, well, let's pursue the variance and see if we can make a case for that.
Okay. So how much of the construction is complete?
At this current, today?
Yes.
It has a roof on, all the windows are in, all the doors are in, there's door trim, so drywall is mudded and primed, and that's where it is.
Substantially complete?
Yes, yes.
And you know, I'm not, this forum is not to do administrative interpretations of the code regarding the projections into the side setback.
Yes,
Do you
I
understand that
understand.
now? Okay.
Yeah.
What did you, so when the initial, the stamp plans came back, approved, what did you, were you aware that was probably an error?
No, I wasn't. I guess because it is our own property and we hadn't done this for ourselves before, I've helped other people get permits. I guess I assumed that the building department had, the building department had noticed everything. I know there was the back and forth with the zoning to get the setback approved, and then I guess I assumed that everything else had been duly inspected, the rest of the plans. So when we got the permit, I was like, okay, great, let's proceed. So that was, my understanding was that the city had approved everything and had made sure everything looked okay.
So you never communicated with the city to clarify what had occurred? Although you did submit revised plans, is that right?
Correct, revised setback plans, but
Right.
then, yeah, there was no more communication regarding the architectural design or structural design following the setback discussion.
Okay. So I wanted to clarify, as I did with Mr. Tefor, we're asking for a minimum side yard setback of 5 feet 8 inches. And that's what you're asking for.
Correct.
As far as the variance goes. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Do you have anything more to add? Again, I wanted to know what made your property peculiar from all the other, what circumstance was peculiar to your property as opposed to all the other properties in the area? And I didn't quite get what you were saying makes it peculiar and different.
I guess the only, as Justice stated, the sizes of the properties are all fairly similar, but I guess the backyard neighbor is different than anyone else's, but I don't know if that necessarily alters anything.
But in the surrounding area, I suppose because a lot of them were built prior to the incorporation of Holladay City.
Yes,
That they have side setbacks that are, a lot of them, less than what you're asking for here today.
correct.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
City, do you have anything more to add? All right. Well, thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I will take this matter under advisement. We'll have a written decision within 5 business days. I do appreciate your professionalism and your civility here today. Thank you very much. And there being no further business or comments, we're adjourned. Thank you.